I am Denise Newton Fitzpatrick, an advocate for the vulnerable community, fighter for civil rights, and an advocate for equality. I am looking at something here. The government remains the biggest obstacle to fair housing. And I'm not surprised at that because, as an advocate for the vulnerable community, I myself and my son are victims of housing discrimination as proven in a court of law. We did not defeat a local government entity because the federal government assisted us, because they did not. In fact, they tried to get me to leave it alone as far as filing the lawsuit alleging illegal housing discrimination in violation of the fair housing laws. I think about this article here, and it is so true because I know that pilot testings go on from time to time by the Housing and Urban Development, which is on the same executive branch of the government as the Department of Justice. And I received information from the HUD saying that they found out, as though they're just finding it out, and they're one of the ones that's discriminating against the people because they're not standing up for the people. They might as well be the ones that's doing it. They said that they found out that the people that are targeted the most for housing discrimination that's illegal are the mentally ill and the homeless. And that is really sad because you hear them saying in homelessness and that and the other, but how can they do that when they don't stand up for the rights of the people? A lot of people remain homeless because of the government's failure to stand up for their rights. I think that Washington does a poor job at enforcing the Fair Housing Act, which are their laws. They were written by Congress in the early to middle 60s, with Lyndon Baines Johnson signing it, President Johnson, with Martin Luther King Jr. looking on. Then in 1988, the Fair Housing Act was amended to include those of a protected class, mental illness, and there's 7 groups of protected class. And when you think about that, I think that back when my son was excluded from housing because he has mental disabilities and schizophrenia, meaning that he's a member of a protected class, yet he was excluded from housing because he has a mental disability. When I stood up against the local government entity who says we're a government agency authorized to provide housing by the federal government, and to think that you were authorized to provide housing, but you, instead of providing it to the member of a protected class, you made it unavailable. So when I look at the article here, I read about how the government does not enforce its laws. It remains the biggest obstacle. Then I know very well that that is not just something made up, but that is very well true. And I know that it's true because I walked in those shoes as a victim of that. I think about the Federal Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, and if it was not for me having the knowledge of the federal, state, and local laws, then I would have not won a preliminary injunction pending trial while the local government entity lost their motion to dismiss. When I was found to have established a prima facie case, it wasn't because the federal government stood up for me or assisted me or guided me along, because, again, they wanted me to leave the lawsuit alone. In fact, they never put their number, as they claimed they would, on the claim that I filed. I made a complaint with the HRC, Human Relations Commission, which is HUD's partner, and I made it with a couple other organizations. But again, if I had not known the 42 USC codes, which are health and welfare, that's federal. USC stands for United States Code. And the Federal Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, those statutes falls under health and welfare, the 42 USC codes. If I did not know my rights under the U.S. Constitution, then I would not have done any good either, because I did know that when housing discrimination is by a government entity, it violates the U.S. Constitution, as well as Section 504 of the Partition Act of 1973, the American Disability Act, or ADA, the state's own Fair Housing Act. And I knew that when the housing discrimination was going to be proven, that it would constitute a civil rights violation as well as a civil liberties violation. There's another statute that was violated. I hadn't gone into that real deep, but I will. Chapter 35A is an apple of that state's guardianship statute was violated. The laws that are in force, that are set in action, that's set forth, are not being enforced. And I don't think that there are enough advocates such as myself. There's other organizations. I mean, many of the advocates and the civil rights organizations have actually brought lawsuits against HUD, but I still don't think there is enough advocates to go the extra mile to really help those of a large amount of people that their rights are offended or they're violated. It seems that when the organizations stand up for those that are violated, it's big groups of people. We know power is in numbers, but we do know that the smaller cases go unhelped. Unhelped may not be a word, but those smaller cases do not receive the help that they should receive as United States citizens. I naturally was born on this soil. It says that the government says that they are in the positions to stand up for its people, and it doesn't do that. I think that the smaller groups, individual groups, I know they are also have the right. They're also born on this soil. They need to be helped in these types of cases, even though they aren't a large group. I think that and know that the larger group, the amount of people that are homeless all over the country, if they would stand together, that would be a good thing. But many of them are scared. They're in fear. Either they don't know how. And I've run into many of them. They're just scared to speak up, or even to have someone speak up for them. Many of them are. But I'm not going to use or say, or in other words, I'm not going to say that that is the reason that the many advocates don't help because they are scared. I don't think that they go the extra mile. And what I do is I help them to the best I can to feel comfortable. And there have been people that have felt comfortable after I have showed them you don't have to be scared. And of course, our case was featured in the newspaper, and it's a voice. And I told the people, I said, so we could do it, you can do it. And so I found out that the people that are scared need that extra push to know that they can do this, that they can stand up, or someone can do it. You don't have to be scared. And I think that that's needed. I think that advocates need to go the extra mile in that way to help them to overcome the barrier of fear. And I know that not enough advocates are not doing that, and that's not good. So as I stand up and speak out and to defend the legal rights of the lowly and the poor, the vulnerable community, I am looking here on my videos, my channel, to find advocates to collaborate with me, that we may have more advocates to do that of which is needed for victims of illegal housing discrimination. Again, I am Denise Newton Fitzpatrick, an advocate for equality, a fighter for civil rights, as my dad was, who told me when I was growing up, he said, if you don't know your rights, you have no rights. I said, yes, Daddy, I understand. He was firm, good dad. He said, if you don't exercise your freedom of speech, you may as well not exist. I said, yes, sir, yes, sir. And then lastly, he said, stand up for your civil rights and the civil rights of others. I thrive to have my own talk show. I hope that through my Facebook, YouTube channel, that through the targeted audience, that I will be able to get others, encourage them, and they will come in and collaborate, that we may together have a show, a live TV show, as we stand up, speak out for the vulnerable community in regards to illegal housing discrimination. This video will be previewed instantly, and I hope someone will listen. Goodbye now.